Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Elise Wilson, and I am joined by my wonderful what are we? We are co-directors. I'm a dentist today, if I want to be, because we've been spending so much time together recently, working on the 501c3 opportunity through the Westmoreland Club, and we are just so excited to have everybody join us this morning for the first of our 4-part series brought to you through Strategy Solutions. This morning, we are going to be talking about finding your new normal and aligning your team to be able to execute quickly. And we are joined by Jackie Cotrebone and John Papalia of Strategy Solutions. Quickly, Jackie is the Director of Nonprofit and Community Services and responsible for providing leadership, organization, project management, client coordination, and support for training, research, planning, facilitation, organizational, and program development, as well as evaluation of special projects for nonprofits. So she clearly is a resident expert in all things 501c3. And John has joined Strategy Solutions in January, having spent over 20 years as a hospital CEO. Prior to that, he was in the automotive industry, working in labor relations, and happens to be an avid golfer and fisherman. Just hearing some great stories about some things that they're doing on the nonprofit front for golf, and really thinking that we might be able to incorporate something in the future for that. So we're really thrilled that the Chamber has partnered with us to bring you this really and truly impactful information at a time that none of us imagined we would be in with COVID-19. So this is being live streamed on Facebook. We also will be recording this and putting together a library. So if you want to share it with others within your organization, you are going to be able to do so. At the end, we will be taking Q&A. So you can type your questions in the chat bar or raise your hand. And also, just in terms of good housekeeping, if you could please make sure to mute yourself in case you're working from home and have little ones or dogs. I think we've all been through that webinar in the past several weeks. We would really appreciate it. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie.
Thank you so much, Elise. John and I are so happy to have this opportunity this morning to be with all of you. We really enjoy this topic, so hopefully all of you have just as much fun listening and participating this morning as John and I are certainly going to. So here's us. You can see us in the screen, so we'll skip that since Elise did a nice little introduction for us. For those of you who may not be familiar with Strategy Solutions, we are actually located in Erie, Pennsylvania. So same state, just a different neck of the woods. And many of us are actually licensed and trained consultants and peer reviewers for PANA, which is the Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations. So much of what we do is connected to the 501c3 community, but we do work in other sectors. But ultimately, at the end of the day, our mission and our work is really driven around creating healthy communities. And that's really through thinking about how do we help each sector maximize what they can do? How do we help each organization grow and fully live into their mission and vision? And what are those connections that can come together to help grow and advance the collective community? No one organization, no one sector is really fully responsible for the health of a community, nor can they succeed alone. So for us, it's really about bringing people together and thriving together. So with that, I will let John share a little story to get us kicked off this morning.
Thanks, Jackie. And it really, it's really a pleasure to be with all of you. And you need to be commended for what you're doing. I was just so interested to hear Elise and Jason quickly talk about what you're doing. It's such an important thing. And it was such a perfect lead-in for my story that I'll tell you. Now, my a little smaller, but you'll see something here. It's everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. And you got to bear with me a minute while I grab the actual story. and not being prepared to read the whole story, was I, Jackie? But let me tell you about it briefly, and not having it right in front of me. I tell you this: sort of everybody had a job to do, and somebody thought anybody would do it. Anybody was sure that somebody was doing it, and ultimately nobody did it. And I think this happens to us so many times, and whatever it is, and I'm really happy to hear it's not happening where you are right now, because somebody is doing something about this and taking action to make a difference. Next slide, please. So, I think that
I'm not sure if John lost his audio or not, but here's what we're hoping to do during our time together this morning is really get you to think about how do you identify what it is that you may need a team for. So during, this time of COVID and a pandemic, early on, you probably needed a team to think through how do we handle communications? How do we deal with what we're even going to do now? And as, we start to, at least here in Pennsylvania, go through our different color phases, maybe you need a team to think through what does each of those colors mean to your organization. Maybe you want a team to think about what do we do if this comes back and we're in another pandemic and we're in a situation we have to shut down again. Maybe you've identified a new opportunity during this time for your business, and you'd like to have a team start kind of thinking through and doing some program development. So the first thing is really ultimately, who do you need? What do you need this body of individuals to do? And then we want to really kind of think through what do they need then? So what might be the skills, competencies, capabilities that you would have in a particular team? You then want to act, right? So how do we pull this team together? What are we going to do? How do we motivate them towards action? And then it's critical that you evaluate their performance so that there's something in place that lets you look at what was the goals and objectives for this team. Did they accomplish them? Are there periodic opportunities to review, refine, make any changes or modifications that come up as related to that? So John is still having some technical difficulties, so we'll just keep running with it, and as he's able to join us, we'll get him to add his commentary. So,
Becky, is it? Oh, I can try
Oh,
it again. Is it better? Ahmad, is that better? Oh, very good. So Ahmad sent me this very nice chat, and I was getting some feedback, so I apologize for that. And thanks for that, Jackie. The next thing you need to do is kind of analyze what your issue is. And, this isn't any different than things that we've probably done before and managed through before. And I'm sure you all can think of issues. But what we really need to do is describe what the issue is, what the problem is, and make sure we act. So many times we have organizations and we see people that they know they've got an issue, they're analyzing it, but they're waiting for the best solution, or they're waiting for a final solution when we need to initiate action to make ourselves better. List possible causes, and this is where, if you haven't done brainstorming before, it's a very valuable tool to do, and then implement a solution and test it. I've seen organizations where they implement a solution to what they're dealing with. They fail to test it, and time goes by and find out that they're really not addressing the root cause of the problem. Understand what the frequency and impact of this is, and focus on where your problems occur. Don't shotgun approach and look at everything else. try to address the problems we're dealing with, and especially these times following COVID. I think we're all going to see things we never dreamed of seeing before. None of us expected this. Next slide, please.
Thanks. And I just want to quickly reiterate, I know today we're talking about kind of teams and how do you equip them and mobilize them for action, but all of this information too, like John was talking about related to a problem, is exactly the steps that you're going to want your team to take to address once you form them to think through or resolve whatever problem, need, new area you want them to explore. So these are also really helpful steps, not only in forming your team, but then also in putting that team to action.
Absolutely, Jackie. And we've had a lot of discussions about a very simple analysis. It's a G and O. And if we take issues or problems or even opportunity, let's look at this as an opportunity to thrive. We talked about that a little bit. What is the issue? Is what you're doing something you can handle as a group? And if it is, take action quickly. If you need help, decide if we need what the help is, get it, and once again, take action. I really think organizations that are going to survive and thrive are going to be moving quickly and have ideas on how to solve issues or to develop new opportunities. If it's outside of your authority, many times in 501c3, let's just talk about them. There are so many government controls and legal, regulatory things. That's where Jackie is certified in the standards is such a valuable resource. You've got to do whatever you can to at least make a recommendation or take action on things that are outside of your ability to change. This is a little off the slide, but I think back a number of years when across our state there was the taxing bodies were really going after the 501c3s, to prove their pure public charities act and other things. I think as this thing shakes out, everybody should be aware again, because everybody's going to be struggling for funds and monies, and that may be your taxing bodies. So I think it's important for you all to be thinking about that and ready for that. And that is something that you can make recommendations to legislators and others. It might be outside of your ability to change, but take that opportunity. Next slide. So some basic beliefs as you're looking at these things and thinking about that. The person doing the job is most likely the one to know it best. And sometimes we forget that. And we don't get down to the level of asking people who are truly doing these jobs, who have a problem with an area, to talk to them. I love working with Jackie. Jackie described herself as the one who gets down to the voice of the employee. And it's such an important part as you work with your teams or you work with volunteers or leaderships to get down to those people, because they want to be informed. They want to feel like they're a part of the job. And I think all of us deserve a voice and our destiny. No more than ever, in my opinion. Next slide, please. Jackie.
So this is a really great exercise for you, not only you as an individual or a leader, but also for teams to walk through. So at the end of the day, for teams to be successful, all of these roles need to be filled. And I will tell you, there is a sophisticated little quiz that goes along with all of this, but we found that, we actually do it in a fun little experiential exercise. We get people up out of their chairs, just briefly talk through what these descriptions are and ask folks to move themselves around the room where they feel appropriate. And for the most part, they go exactly where people would pick them. And if you would take the quiz that goes along with this, it's lockstep. So this is nothing that needs to be complicated or sophisticated or cost you any amount of money. But it's really helpful to look at and understand where people on your team fit. And this can be looking at your leadership team. It can be looking at your board. It can be looking at a new ad hoc team that you're creating to explore a one-off idea. But essentially, the idea is, you've got to have the people who come up with the ideas and create them. But what happens is, more often than not, those people are so busy up here thinking about these ideas that they're not able to kind of pause, develop a work plan. They're not likely going to be the ones to do them. So it's really important that you have people, and you know who they are, that can come up with those ideas. You also need the people who are advancers. So we kind of call these people the cheerleaders and the champions. So they're going to be the biggest advocate for new ideas, and they're going to help keep the team moving and motivated and on task, and they can help deal with the naysayers out in the rest of your organization. So it's really important to understand who those people are. You also need refiners on your team. So these are the people that always go, well, what about this? Or have we thought about this? Do we have the money to do this? Do we have enough staff? So they often come off kind of challenging the process, but they play a really role on teams because they really encourage and almost force the vetting of the ideas and what the team is hoping to accomplish. And then you need people to do it, right? So you need the executors, you need the worker bees who are actually going to take this great idea that's now been fully vetted and thought out through the team and make it happen. And then there are also people who tend to be flexors. And so they just naturally kind of step back, observe a team and a process, and fill in relevant gaps. So as individuals, you can be any of these, and you can even be combinations of them. So if our, president of our company was here, she'll tell you she's a creator refiner, which is like one of the most frustrating things if you're an outsider to it, right? So these are the people always coming up with the ideas, but then always refining their ideas. So if you're an advancer executor, which is where I tend to fall, it's almost impossible. It's like you feel like you want to duct tape the person's mouth. So like, stop talking, let me run with the one idea, stop playing with it before we even have a chance to implement it. So you want to think through how people on your team show up to this. And the other thing to keep in mind is you may play different roles on different teams. So there may be a team that already has a really strong leader or somebody who created the idea, and you've been asked to join the team to really help advance it. So it's not your role to then kind of step up and create a new idea. The idea has already been identified. So even though you may be an actual creator, in that situation, you may have to kind of step back and use one of your other gifts to benefit that team. The other thing that's really important to think of is, so sometimes we have teams of one, right? You may not have the luxury of having a whole lot of people to help support an idea or advance what you're doing in your day-to-day job. So in the absence of that, you as an individual have to figure out how to either do these roles or mobilize someone else to get some outside help to nudge and advance your ideas. But a great place to start with your teams is to really get a sense for who's on the team, what role do they play, and then encourage them to think through the different strengths and gifts that each one of those roles brings to it, so that as the team moves through a process, they can be mindful of those skills and utilize them to the best of their ability. And if anybody is interested, I can make sure that we get Elise and Ahmad the information for this team dimension so that you can do it with your teams as well. The other thing, right now, innovation tends to ebb and flow for a buzzword right now, and even before. But at the end of the day, for organizations to thrive and be sustainable beyond the situation we're currently faced with, everyone's has to innovate, and you have to adapt. So we tend to tell specifically our nonprofit organizations that we work with, we encourage them to read this book. It's a cute little kind of allegory. It's simple to read. I said, honestly, at the time I read it, my kiddos were littler and required supervision while bathing. So while they splished and splashed, I, kind of went and read through this book. So it's a simple read. It's an easy read, but it's all about this farm. And they used to process and manufacture sheep wool. And then all of a sudden these alpacas arrived and they were now going to process and manufacture alpaca wool, which they found is very, very different from sheep wool. So it's just cute. The characters all have names and personalities that quickly you'll be able to kind of go, oh yeah, that's so-and-so in our office. So it's a fun read, but what it does is it really gets you to think through how to be successful at innovation. And innovation can just be something new. It doesn't have to be, people often equate it to something techy and flashy. It doesn't. It's just anything new or different for your organization. But what happens more often than not is everybody's busy. You're doing 1,001 things just to do your day-to-day job. And now all of a sudden we've decided we're going to do this new thing, right? So just stay with the new program, right? So maybe as a result of this pandemic, you realize that there's a gap in the community in a service that meets your mission. It's something that you certainly could provide as an organization, but you've got to think through the program development and what would that actually include, right? So what would the program do? Who would the program serve? How would we market and let people know the program's available? What would the staffing structure look like? And is it even reimbursable, right? Like, how are we going to get paid now to do this program? So that's a lot of stuff to think through. And if you're already crazy busy doing your day-to-day job and you've now got to carve off time to think through this new idea, what happens, unfortunately, it's just human nature, it's organizational behavior, is the important stuff you're dealing with today is always going to take precedence, and this thinking through the new stuff is going to get put on the back burner. So what the professors who wrote Stella, and there is an actual textbook that goes with the cute allegory for people who like more academic information, but what they have found is for anything to be successful and really get over the goal line, you've got to follow this model. So you've got this dedicated team moving and advancing the idea, the product, whatever it is, forward. But what tends to be missing is the team's probably great people who relate to the program, but you may not always have HR on your team. You may not always have finance on your team. So it's really important that the people in those other kind of ancillary departments understand that they may have to kind of come in and out of this team because you need their input and their information. And you also have to figure out, what can you take off of the individuals that are now on this team? How do you minimize that current workload? Because in the absence of taking something away, it's never going to happen. So it's kind of this twofold process as you build this team to either figure out what can be kind of carved off and temporarily moved either to another person or maybe even paused if it's something that has the flexibility of a timeline to kind of sit for a minute and give time to develop and focus on this new innovative idea. And then it's really important that you explain to other people who may not be part of the team, but may have input on what their role is. So you're not in a position where this team goes to HR and says, all right, so we were tasked with creating this new program. I now need your help in thinking through the staffing and what might, a job description look like. And they go, whoa, like, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about this. We're already crazy busy dealing with the things we're doing. I don't have time for that. So you need to make sure that there's the collective organization rallying around it. So one of the questions that I will say comes up a lot is, does this team have to be existing people, right? So can I keep the people doing their day-to-day job that they're already good at, and then can I bring in someone new or a couple of new people to focus on this new idea? So we've seen it work both ways. So the luxury of that is it becomes very clear early on to the organization as a whole that they're doing something new. So it tends to be a little bit easier to get buy-in. They're obviously, they have no other job duties, so you don't run the risk of, you know, things kind of getting delayed or them getting pulled back into their day-to-day job, because this is their job. So for things that need to be advanced quickly, that has been a successful strategy. I will say though, on the other side of the coin here, sometimes it's difficult because then, I mean, it's organizational culture, it's human nature. People look at this new team, and since they're kind of in this creating idea space, you see them not contributing towards the organization or towards productivity, and they may be perceived as not working as hard. So if you're going to do that, that's a potential barrier that's really important to manage from how you roll out and introduce the new team, and how you kind of protect your organizational culture so that things like that don't happen. The other kind of potential limitation is if the new idea doesn't get off the ground, now what do you do with these people? So did you just bring them in to think through the idea, and you know they're contracted, so if it doesn't become a thing, their position goes away? Or do you now have to figure out how to absorb these people into your organization? So it can go one of two ways, but the most important thing is that you've got people who have dedicated time to focus on this new idea, and there's that relationship back and forth with, you know, HR, finance, whoever it may be, to help get them the information that they need to advance and move the idea a little bit more forward. So with that, I will let John take back over.
Thanks, and we're gonna see if Ahmad has been able to technically help me through a chat. How's my sound? Is feedback a good deal? Thank you so much. So you know, the world has changed. I love that presentation that Jackie just gave. There's a whole thought process that's came out a few years ago, and my feedback started again. I'll try one more time, okay? I'm very sorry, everyone. How is it now? No. So, Jackie, do you want to just talk about leadership? And I'm going to try doing a dial-in. Correct, Ahmad? Okay.
Sure. Thank you all for bearing with us this morning during our tech challenges. That we are still working remotely, so sometimes we've got additional challenges that pop up for us related to our technology. But so what we have found over time is for teams to be successful, for change to be successful, organizations to be successful, it really takes strong leadership in this comprehensive approach. So you've got to figure out how as an organization to maximize the input and what you get from the leaders, but also letting the rest of the team move forward. And it's a balance between kind of this top up, bottom down perspective and approach. So the more voices that can be brought into a process, the more beneficial it can be. So even though you've got, you know, this dedicated team that now you're working on, it's important that they think through this. And it's important as you look at carving out a leadership team, what are the skills that you need and you want them to have? And one of the greatest things a leader can do is get input and listen to the voice of the people that work with and for them. And And that ultimately will help lead you to successful change. I'm not sure if we have John back. So it's important to know that anything your organization is going to do may be faced with resistance. And even those with the most innovative, fast-paced organizational culture from time to time are going to hit hiccups. And you've got to be prepared for how do you manage and deal with those hiccups along the way. So you may have skeptics. And what we have found more often than not is these people, kind of going back to that team dimension profile, they're the refiners. So more than anything, they're the ones who just want to throw out notes of caution and make sure everything has been thought through and vetted. So they're not skeptics in the sense that they completely disagree with this idea and think it's awful for the organization, or they want to somehow intentionally like thwart the progress of it. They really just want to be heard. More often than not, there's some concern that they have identified that really warrants being vetted. That's why the greatest thing your team can do is ask questions, bounce ideas off of other people. The better opportunity you have to identify those potential concerns and challenges, the better off you'll be. So, I mean, if you think about kind of program development or product development, it's a very kind of systematic, staged approach that builds in intentional time to get input. So you want to make sure you do that. The other thing that's really important to think about is as we start to do new things, as we start to make changes, people who may have been in a position of authority, they may perceive that they're in a position to lose that. And that can get people really uncomfortable. So the more information that can be communicated up front, the better, right? And so when we think about COVID and the current pandemic, all of this stuff really mattered early on. I mean, as people began to lay off or furlough their employees, you had some of this potential loss of authority, loss of power, or even just this sense of uncertainty, which made it a really uncomfortable and challenging space for people to be in. So it's important to be mindful of that and just communicate it and reassure, as the best that you can. You also want to think through, again, sort of what do people stand to lose their status in the organization? Where are we at from, you've got people who may want to be the deal makers. Well, if you do this, then I want that. So with anything new you're going to do, and even something as simple as forming a new team, you've got to be mindful of how is that group or that new idea going to be perceived by the rest of the organization, and what can you do to let those who may be a skeptic or have a concern bring voice to it? How can you reassure everyone that this isn't going to impact their role, their contribution, their space in the organization, that what this team or what this new idea is going to do is really going to benefit the organization and ultimately benefit the individual that you serve and you exist for. Do we have John?
Yes, I do believe we have John on phone now. However, John, we're going to need you to turn your computer volume down and keep yourself on mute and just let the phone be your only source of audio. I can hear you, but I'm still hearing the feedback from your computer.
So in the interest of time, I hate to do this because John has such valuable input, but I will just, I guess I will just continue and we'll finish. And if John's able to join us without feedback at the end, he can add some additional color commentary. But I do want to be mindful of all of your time. So one of the things that you've got to think through for your team to really be efficient and effective is you want people who are flexible and they can really help one another. They can help recognize and build on the strengths of people. It's important that this team knows what its objective is and how they're going to be measured. So if it's not clear why this team is together or what they're supposed to be accomplishing, that gives you the ability to have, 5 people going off in different directions, or kind of the hamster in the wheel where, it seems like nothing is getting accomplished. So it's really important that the team knows what's expected of them, as well as how are they going to be measured. So, are they held accountable strictly for an outcome? Are there some other intermittent things that you need them to do? So, is developing the plan and ideas, concept testing the plan and idea, all things that maybe they'll be measured on. One of the things we always talk about is, stakeholder input from others. So intermittently throughout the process, it's really important that, this team kind of takes pause, shares their ideas maybe back with the leader, or maybe gets input from those who would do the job or would have to interact with the job and get input. Here's what we have so far. Does this make sense? What do you think about this? Do you see any potential concerns or challenges that we might experience? And then it lets the team kind of take that feedback and refine the process as they go. It's really important that you've got people with solid team skills, right? It is really critical that you've got someone in each of those 4 or 5 roles that we talked about earlier. And for the team to be successful, they've got to communicate. They've got to work with one another. They've got to respond to one another. They've got to be mindful and respectful. So think about creating ground rules for the team. So we agree that, we'll respond to anyone on this team within 24 hours of receiving an email or whatever it may be. We agree to respect ideas and, listen. Only one person talks at a time, whatever it may be. So you want to identify what those particular skills are. One of the things that we have found personally within our own organization to work really well, and we certainly work with all organizations to try to equip their teams to follow this idea, is the completed staff work principle. So these are great skills to have, and it minimizes frustration or even opportunity for someone to micromanage when you can follow this concept. And it really comes down to taking ownership of the assignment. So whatever you're given, recognize that it is yours to own and do with. You don't need to bounce every single idea off of the person who gave it to you. Sorry?
Oh, hello, Jackie.
Hi.
So, okay, I think I figured it out. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, John, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I'm out of the meeting on my computer. If you can just relaunch me, I'll be back in.
So John, we won't be able to bring you back in if you just want to add any follow up on add anything to the discussion from Jackie's talk. Given the feedback, we had to remove you, and just your phone will be your source of audio.
Very good. And sorry about this once again, everyone. I'm not quite sure what happened. Jackie, off you go. I'll try to catch up with you.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll give you an opportunity at the end to add any additional thoughts you have. So in addition to taking ownership of the assignment, the critical piece and where this becomes the most beneficial is when the team is able to clarify what the expectations and the outcomes are. So whoever's decided this team needs to come together and given them this new challenge, I mean, and even if it's just a leadership team, right? So there's not even a challenge. It's just a new group of people who are going to sit in on meetings and help advance the direction of the organization. But one of the things that's really helpful is if there is kind of a quote unquote assignment or a to-do given, it's really important to clarify what the expectations and outcomes are from the person who gave that to you. So ask questions, give examples, make sure that when you walk away, you fully understand what you need. So am I supposed to put together a PowerPoint? Are you looking for a Word document? Is this something quick and dirty, or is this something that's going to be seen by others outside of the organization that we've got to make visually appealing? What's the expectation, right? So do I need to do research and put this together? Do you want me to come back to you every week to meet and show where we are in the process? What do you ultimately expect from the team? And then you want to research best practices and alternatives. So you really want to essentially do your homework so that now you've taken ownership of this thing. You want to do the best you can. You want to be successful. So research what else is out there. So back to, again, this idea of if you're going to do something new now as a result of a gap that's been identified during COVID-19 and this pandemic, look at who else is doing it. I mean, we have found most organizations are really, the nonprofit community is great, right? I mean, everybody wants to help everyone. They want to support one another. So if you find someone doing a similar program, in a neighboring county or even in a different state, we've had luck just calling them and saying, hey, we're thinking about starting this program. Like, do you got a couple of minutes? Can we chat? And they'll explain what were their challenges. What have they found successful? What were barriers that they didn't even think were going to be a barrier that they experienced? So it helps give an extra layer of input into your planning process and really lets you possibly prevent some hiccups that maybe you'd have along the way. And then what the team ultimately needs to do, make a recommendation. So you've challenged and tasked us to do X, so develop this new program. Here's what we think based on the research we've done, based on the conversations we've had, based on what we know about our population and our community. Here's what we think would be successful. And throughout the process, you want to manage the expectations of who needs this outcome or deliverable from you. So even if you've got, a random idea or you feel like you get stuck, toss it. We sort of have this like throw spaghetti against the wall concept in our organization. So, right, so you take it so far, you sort of toss it back to whoever gave you the assignment, whether it's internal or external, and let them react to it. I like this, I don't like this. Oh my gosh, did you not even hear what I said? This is like completely out of left field, right? But it gives you a chance so that you don't spend all of this time on this outcome that failed to meet the expectations on the back end. So it's critical to have that iterative back and forth dialogue. So you want to talk about setting objectives and measuring them? Have you back?
I think I'm back. If that works, somebody give me a hint, and I have my PowerPoint up in front of me. So I really apologize for this, folks, and I'm not sure what really happened, but hopefully it's working now. Just a comment on a couple of things. As Jackie talked about innovation and the teams together, one of the biggest initiatives that came out of the American Healthcare Executives is disruptive innovation and taking the time to disrupt your organization sometimes is good. Sometimes we do that by choice. Sometimes we do that by a pandemic hitting us. We need to be thinking about those innovations, and what it leads to many times is we'll also find out that we've been productive at doing things we really didn't need to do in the first place. And you will make yourself better. You will make yourself leaner. And we've all been talking about how important that is in these times. We started out at the beginning about funding, and we think about 501c3s, where's your funding going to come from? And we need to make sure our organizations are lean. We're trying to manage our expenses. We're trying to find revenues. Think about chambers and what's going to happen to your membership. Are there ways to make sure you sustain your members? So when we do all that and we put that together, we need to talk about what our objectives are going to be. And the first thing I always try to talk about when we talk to organizations is make it realistic. So many times we'll try to set objectives that are actually not obtainable. So let's try to make things realistic for your organizations. Give yourself a way to measure them. Make sure your organization understands them, and let people have some control in achieving those objectives. Stay with them. You know, you can read the things in the block, but try to make sure everybody understands what it is you're hoping to do, and stay with them. So many organizations are accused of, oh, it's just another plan. And I think we all become guilty of that. You know, our intentions are good to set an objective and go out and do it, and 3 months from now or 6 months from now, nobody knows what it is. Work really hard to say, this is something we need to do. It's going to make our organization better. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I can't overemphasize that. And I think you'll be successful in what you do. There's a couple of quick read books that I'd say to you that are very worthwhile. And one of them is called 212, The Next Degree. And it's a very simple book about what happens when you just give it one more degree of effort. And water at 211 degrees is hot. Water at 212 degrees can power a steam engine. And I think if you bring those messages to your organization about the extra degree and that extra degree of effort, great things will happen with your organization. Okay. Next slide, Jackie.
So
I think we are.
Yeah. So I mean, unless there's
question.
anything else you want to add, John, since I know you missed an opportunity to talk earlier.
Which is always a tough thing for me, Jackie will tell you. But I really think, first of all, I think your community is on the right track and you're already being innovative, which is a great thing. Find ways to support that. And I was going to talk to you about supporting one another is probably as critical as anything you're going to be doing right now. And, you know, your ability to work together and be a team and support one another through the good, the bad, and the mistakes, because you're going to make them. I joke with Debbie Thompson, who's the president and CEO of Strategies, and I said, you know, if you're not doing anything, you can't make a mistake. So being understanding of mistakes and errors and just continue to go forward. That's really my message more than anything else. And I think organizations that do that if they fall down, they fall forward, and they support each other, they build trust, and with trust becomes relationships, and with that becomes success, and you'll be fine. We're happy to answer any questions, give you some of our experiences that we've been through and been able to see ourselves don't hesitate to reach out to us. Are there questions? We'd love some.
So I do also, I just want to let everybody know that we've been really struggling with how can we help organizations during this time. And so for us, we've committed to anybody who participates in any webinars that we show up in. We're happy to, just offer a free 30-minute chat to help and support with any topic that you may just feel you need a little outside perspective on. So it can be teams, it can be how do you deal with your new planning, how do you rethink your budget, really anything, board challenges. So we're just, during these times, anything we can do to help organizations, we're just desperately trying to do so. So if you feel like you want some additional support or have some additional questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. And I'd be happy to set you up with someone on our team that can help you think through that. So with that, John and I will thank all of you, and I will let Elise and Ahmad manage any questions we may have.
Jackie and John, number one, despite the challenges in terms of audio, and we know that we're all working remotely and that these things are bound to happen, what an amazing presentation and full of such pertinent information that I myself, as not in a 501c3 sector, still can utilize and implement with my team. So incredibly relevant. Thank you. Second, we do have some time for Q&A, and if anyone has questions, you can type them in the chat bar to your right, or you can put your hand up and we can unmute you. But also to offer the opportunity to help these organizations at no cost to them really and truly just shows kind of that paying it forward. And I continue each day, depending on who I'm talking to or what I'm watching on television, to just be humbled and really proud to see that people are doing whatever they can to help others. And I believe that it comes back to you full circle, and it doesn't have to be immediate, but it will. So we have a question from Jamie Kane. Jamie, thank you for typing in. We are starting to see this type of local collaboration, and I believe it's truly important to connect with each other. I think this is an opportunity to not only redefine our own organizations, but also the local nonprofit community as a whole. Can you speak to that a bit?
I'll take a little shot at that, Jamie, and tell you this, that and I can only give you an example of Warren, but through the Warren County Chamber of Business and Industry, kind of a different name. What's happening is, we've had in our chamber groups, human resource groups and purchasing groups and other kind of groups. Warren has now formed a group specifically for 501c3 executive directors, CEOs, and they are coming together, and they've really never done that. They're coming together with concerns that they're going to experience and talk about the leadership challenges. I'm thrilled to hear that, and you may or may not have that in your area, but I'd highly recommend that. In fact, we're working for Jackie to come down and speak to that group and talk to them about board of directors and the standards of not-for-profits. So I would offer that to you, as I think it's going to be a really good idea. It's just in its startup phase, but Jackie, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, John. So, I love that you're even thinking about this. I know this is an area organizations struggle with, and I will say, I mean, one of the things that we're starting to hear, we've been doing a handful of outreach calls, just kind of checking in with our nonprofit friends to see how they're doing and what they're thinking about. But many of them were in a position, that they had to minimize their staff, and some of them aren't likely going to bring back their staff in a full complement. So they're starting to think about, when you think of a small nonprofit, does everyone really need their own like HR person or their own finance person? So they're beginning to kind of ask those questions and identify, who are sort of like-minded organizations, or maybe you may even be in a shared space already because you both happen to rent from the same office space, but are there opportunities to get creative and think through ways to collectively share resources or collectively share staff people? So, we've actually got a ton of information about organizational collaboration and relationship opportunities that certainly, we can be happy to share that as well if that's things people are interested in. Because I think more often than not, organizations think like our only option is to do a full-blown merger with another organization. And that's not it at all. There's a ton of creative ways organizations can come together to kind of minimize cost and some of those other things that get in the way of truly living out the mission. And, in doing so, organizations can be more successful, more efficient, and maybe even reach more organizations. So it's certainly a great time to have this conversation. Like I said, I know we've talked to a handful that are at least thinking through it in terms of staffing and how maybe they can work together. So thank you.
I will add to this, and I'll just share with you anonymously, but we have had many discussions at Strategy Solutions and are building off a management service or management support organization. We currently have, there's a foundation, and the foundation lost their development director. And we are actually doing the development for them. We have access to grant writers. We have access to so many other resources. And what we found is we are able to do their development for them with a team of experts, quite frankly, and we're doing that for less cost than they had with a full-time employee, and we're actually raising more funds. So it's thinking differently that do we need to have a full-time, whatever that may be, human resource directors? Can you get that through a management support organization? This is working very, very well.
Well, I think the objective always in business, and really this is the way that we have to think about these organizations, is to work smarter, not harder. And that looks many different ways for many different organizations. But I think looking at all options and then determining what's best for you, whether it's a temporary situation or ends up being permanent, knowing what is available is the first step in making that informed decision. So I want to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time because we did have from 10 until 11, and I do have 11:01. Obviously, Jackie and John said that they would be happy to be available for additional questions and potentially even extended conversations. So I want to say thank you very much for that. And I think, Jackie, you have some items that you'll send to me that I'll be able to share with the group. We did record this. So we will be able to put together a library that you'll be able to take advantage of in the future if you want to go back in and re-listen to some of this amazing content and information. And I want to remind everybody that next week at the same time, we are going to be having our second part of this 4-part series, and the topic will be Cash Now, Fundraising Strategies During Crisis. That's Wednesday, June 24th at 10 a.m., and the host will be Margie Taylor. So Jackie, John, thank you so much for your time, effort, and energy in putting this together for our amazing attendees, and we look forward to being in close touch in the future.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Have a great day.
Great rest of your
Be very proud of yourselves. Thanks.